Well, hello to all of you that are watching. Welcome to another episode of the Young American Exploration with Trevor Mauk. That's me. Wow, who would have thought? I apologize. It's been a little while since the last upload. I feel like I've been saying that for the past few episodes here, and so yeah, it's tough out here in college, man. Time escapes you like crazy. But I still try to do these episodes. I still try not to forget, because something that I gotta work on myself is like making sure I commit to more voluntary things, right? So when I say I'm going to do something, I need to make sure I'm doing it. When other people tell me to do something, I do it, no problem. But when I tell myself I want to do something, sometimes it doesn't always happen. But I have a lot of knowledge, and, well, at least what I think is knowledge, and a lot of perspective that I feel like I need to share. So I'm going to keep on doing that to the best of my ability. So, without further ado, so what is this episode about? The title, at least I think it should be, the title should be, like, how would you like your government with that? Kind of a funny play on words. But today I want to talk about what government or what the political parties in the government represent. With the recent election that just passed, I'm sure a lot of you, well, I'm sure a good number of you are a little confused. What does the party, what do the parties stand for? Because I feel like a big problem with what I see in society now, especially among younger people, is that they're too quick to judge, say, the parties or individuals in the parties kind of based off of fame or what words people say about them and things of that nature. But it needs to be based off something a little bit more ideologically based, because that's why you should vote for them, right? So when you go out to vote, you want to, ideally, you want to vote on things that matter to you. And I hope that this video can help you distinguish what parties say are more aligned with how you see the world, and how the government should go about fixing the problems that could be in your life or in society's life, society's life. Huh? Okay, so the two big political parties in today's America are the Democratic and the Republican Party. And there are a lot of misconceptions, I would say, on both, and like I said, I think the big problem with that is because people don't take them as ideologically based. And when you don't take it as ideologically based, you can sort of sacrifice knowledge of what they are, right? Because that's what they really are plans of operating the government based off of an ideology. So it's more of like a left-right political spectrum, right? So you often hear people like, oh, the like crazy far right wingers or radical leftists. So those would be two people on the total opposite of the spectrum and very far on the spectrum. And then you may have heard of the term centrist. It's someone who's right in the middle, and then someone who's it's kind of funny, the oxymoron that you hear sometimes, like, I'm a Democratic Republican, or I'm a Republican Democrat, or no, it's it's like a liberal Republican or a conservative Democrat. I mean, I don't know how that really exists, but I think the name is not accurate, but it's the best that, or it suffices. However, I guess it works. But so anyways, what exactly is the left and the right? What is being a conservative in the United States? What is being a liberal in the United States? And like when you call yourself one of these things, it should not be because of what others around you are saying. It should be because of the fact that you align with the ideology or not. And something I want to preface most of this video on is that there's not one way or the other. It's not just left or right. Like I said, it's a big spectrum. So, if you actually analyze it much more, it's not just a left-right spectrum. You actually have, okay, this is my left hand. I don't know how the camera is going to shake it, but the left and the right, and then you also have a vertical axis as well. So it can be much more complex than just left, right. So if some of these problems, say you agree with a problem on the left, or say you agree with an idea on the left and then an idea on the right, doesn't mean that you can't be one or the other. It's just someone said it nicely, but to paraphrase what that someone said, which I know this is a very broad statement, right? So you can't be a pure or there's no, like, you don't have a pure political preference, something of that sort. So let's just get right into it. So what is the left and the right? So what, like I said a few minutes ago, is that they're just, both of these ideologies are a means of solving problems that a government should solve. So what the left believes is, the left believes in, the left being the Democrats in the United States, the left believes in more government. So when you have a problem in society, or something just with the United States rather, they believe that the government should solve the problem. So the other hand is the right, the Republicans. They believe that the government should stay out of these problems. And when you first hear the statement, it can seem like, well, then if the government's going to stay out of my problem, then how's it going to get solved? But me having my personal bias to the right, spoiler alert if you haven't seen my other videos, but the right has its own ways of solving those problems besides the government. And in my personal belief, I believe that is the, no pun intended, I believe it's the right way to go, and I believe it's the most successful. But I want to do my honest, an honest job of portraying both sides without a bias. And if I really do want to do a video explaining conservative ideas and sort of making a case for them, but I don't want this to be that video. So anyways, so what are some examples of more government intervention being on the left and then less government intervention being on the right? So a perfect example are taxes, right? So in any debate where you have a Democrat versus a Republican, I would almost bet any amount of money that nine times out of 10 they are at some point going to talk about taxes. So something that the Democrats, what they do, and they don't explicitly say this all the time, essentially what they want is they want higher taxes. So they believe that paying higher taxes would allow the government to solve these problems. And what the right believes is lowering taxes, and they believe that by lowering taxes, that's more money in the taxpayer's pocket, and that's more money for them to spend in the market and potentially correct those problems. So I'll give you an example. you have, say, a small business, right? So you have this small business that's being affected by, say, maybe a bad road, or something that's just kind of an inconvenience, not just for the business, but it's hindering the success of the business. So this is the most objective example I could give. So this is how the left would solve that problem. They would say, okay, we want to raise the taxes on the business, so that's more money coming from the business to the government. What that money can be used for is, say, to fix the road. What the right believes in, how a typical conservative would go about or say about solving this problem would be, no, dial back the taxes, let the small business keep its money, and then the small business could perhaps itself, after keeping more money, can invest in fixing the road itself, or like not the business itself fixing it, but hiring a contract crew or something, and going let's say more of it, for argument's sake, that there's not all these bureaucratic government obstacles that you have to go through to fix a road. But so the small business would pay a contracting business to fix the road, and so that's why. Well, see, what I'm trying to get at here is that the underlying cause of this is to solve problems, right? So that's something that a lot of people forget when people on both sides are arguing, is that sometimes they forget that, hey, we want to solve the same problems, but we just want to do it differently. Our means are different, but our end is the same. And so another example I would like to give you for the left and the right is, say, healthcare, right? So just like taxes, in any debate with someone on the left and on the right, 9 times out of 10, they will always talk about healthcare. So this is what the left believes. The left believes, and a lot of this is through taxes. So the left believes that raise taxes. Okay, that's how they get their money, right? So they get their money from the public. Raise taxes, get more money, and spend it on healthcare. And they want to provide the healthcare to the citizens. And then the right believes in, well, no, hold on. Lower taxes, that puts more money into the taxpayer's pocket. That lets them keep more of their money and let them buy their own health care, right? And I'm going to loop this all back around here in just a moment, but it's like that underlying cause, right? So we need health care. It's something that at least in America everyone is expected by culturally to have, and so some people can't always afford health care. And I don't want to go down this rabbit hole of why healthcare can be so expensive, because believe me, it is a really deep and long rabbit hole. But they want to solve that problem of how healthcare can be expensive and hard to obtain. So the final example, which is a much more broad example that portrays the ideologies of each entity, it's basically the market. So how does the left and the right want to intervene or not intervene in the market? So the left believes that when there are problems that come up in the market, say you have a business that is doing something wrong, or you have say there's a need by the public and a business is not satisfying that need like they should, or I shouldn't say like they should, but like maybe the society should expect them to. So the left believes that the government should be used to enforce, well, I should say, clamp down on business and tell them, say, what to sell, how much to sell it for, and basically it's government, full-blown government intervention in the market. And that's kind of further down the spectrum of left to right. People much further on the left, they want more and more government, and they believe it's the only way to solve the problem is to have the government tell a business what it can and cannot do. So it seems kind of logical, right? Like, who's supposed to correct for this market failure besides the government, right? It's the only entity that seems to do that. Well, it's kind of the if you ask, who else can solve market failures besides the government? Well, the answer is, for the right, the answer is kind of in the question. So who can solve market failures besides the government? Well, the right would say the market, because the best way I can demonstrate this is giving you an example. So say you have a business, like say you have a food business, right? And these people, they demand better food, right? The food quality is kind of terrible, the service is bad. And what would the people do? What would you do? Well, presumably you would stop going there. Like many other people, that would stop going there. That would end up lowering the revenue from the business. That's less money for the business, and then they fail. But you still need food, right? You still want good food. So what do? You go to another place that has better food and better customer service. And what that does is it helps refine the market in a way that satisfies the consumer best. And I can't help but do this, but to insert my own personal bias here, and I want to make sure I'm clear whenever I do this, I believe it's the best way because you don't have the government telling people what to do. Because when the government can tell these these companies what to do, and then they don't do it, that's people sort of, I don't want to say going to jail, but it's...
I did get locked out.
Sorry, I don't know if you could hear that voice, but that's what happens when you're living in a college dorm. But anyways, I kind of lost my train of thought. But, oh yes, okay. So I believe it's the best way because it allows for more freedom of the individual, and then freedom of the supplier, as in the supplier to the demand of the consumer, being the business. And when you have more freedom, you're allowed to sort of operate in a way that you want, right? So that's exactly what freedom is. And but I digress. So that's kind of how that ties into healthcare, right? So the right believes that. So let's take Obamacare. That's a perfect example. So Obamacare, the government tells you that they want to ensure that you have healthcare. But what do? They tell you who to get your healthcare from, how to get it, and what exactly you can get. So what that does is it kind of puts on a constriction to the healthcare suppliers, in that they have to serve the consumer. And you have to think about it in the sense, being a consumer, if you were the supplier of that, would you want to be forced to provide that service to someone? Would you want to feel forced to do that? Or would you want to feel free to do what you think you should and what you could do. And so in that example, Obamacare, that's more government in your healthcare. And with what the right is doing, and in fact, there's a really good debate between Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders, I think, what was it, like a year or two ago? It was about a year and a half ago. And they were debating on this exact problem on healthcare. And what the right believes, take the government out of healthcare, and this is what happens. You get a much better free market to where you don't have to have the government tell you who gives you your service. Maybe that person isn't right for your service. Well, guess what? Now you can go find someone who can offer better service to you. And what that does is that gives better competition, right? And I'll kind of get into competition just here in a minute. But it gives better competition. So what that does is it creates better suppliers, right? Going back to that food business, right? If you have a really bad food store or food business, and then you have another food business that's much better, guess what? The one that's much better is going to rise on top, and the one that's worse is going to fail. But in the end, the consumer is happier, right? And that's what it is, right? So we're in America and we want to be happy, and that's the best way to make us happier is to let the market refine itself. Now I'm going on. I just caught myself, but I'm going off on a little bit of a right wing bias here. But anyways, I digress. So to touch on competition a little bit more. The reason why, and I'll be totally honest with you, this is like full-blown right-wing bias by me. But the reason why competition is a really good thing, and that's what the right advocates for, is competition. So when you have the government telling you, kind of operating the means of the business, you don't allow the entity to fail, right? And that's kind of the bigger picture, right? This is why I believe in conservative values and in conservative values of government. So when you have something that's operated by the government, say healthcare, when it's operated by the government can't fail. And you think about this, right? You've seen on the news I shouldn't say recently, but relatively recently, the government shut down. And you go, oh, the government shut down. Well, it opened right back up. So the government can't exactly fail. I don't even remember how much debt we're in, but we're in, I believe it's $20 trillion, if not more, $20 trillion of debt, but the government is still chugging along. So what that does is it de-incentivizes success, right? And, I don't want to say success, but it de-incentivizes hard work. So the reason why I believe the competition is much better is because, guess what? You get the government out, and you allow these businesses to operate independent from the government, and you let them sort it out. And how do they sort it out? They let the consumer choose. And so what happens is that the government, since it's out of there, and the consumer can choose, like I said, you get refinement of that service due to competition. And I'm no economics teacher, let alone economics major, but I urge you to take an economics class if you can. Most people take one in high school, and if you do, please pay attention. And if not, go to say if you're out of high school, go to a community college and just take an economics class. So just taking one class shouldn't be too expensive at a community college. But anyways, I digress. This is all stuff that you learn about in economics. And hopefully you have someone a little less biased than I do, but I think I'm portraying I know I'm portraying the market well, with and without government. So that's sort of how the government, or how the left and the right likes to operate, right? Left, more government. Government needs to operate everything. So the government is sent in. The right says no, less government. Let the market decide. Now that's all well and good, but how do you kind of fully understand what the left and the right believe in, right? So what's sort of at the core values of someone who is on the left and the core values of someone who is on the right? So I just want to give some examples of that, and two main examples. One of them is sort of like the deep belief of each one, and then the second one is how that sort of plays out individually. Well, sorry, not individually, culturally. So a good example of a difference between, or a big distinction between the left and the right is the left is for what, at least in America, this is definitely what I see. The left is for globalism or internationalism. And what they believe in is that if everyone can band together and operate as one, we would be better off. Now, it sounds like a good idea. It's like, oh, well, if we were all together, less problems, right? We're all operating under one, not too bad. I held that belief many years ago when I was young. How about that? And I've come to realize that I personally don't see that as the way. And what is the opposite of internationalism? The opposite of internationalism is, well, you guessed it, nationalism. So what nationalism is placing the first, or placing top priority in the individual nation itself. And that is a trait of the right. So you have nationalism, nationalist sentiment amongst people on the right, and you'll have international globalist sentiment on the left. And what nationalists believe, and just to sort of like what does it mean? So this is how they see to solve problems internationally, right? So there's a world that we all live in, and we have to get along. Well, we don't have to, but anyways, I digress. In modern society, we have to get along, and the means of solving that problem are different amongst the two, but the problem is the problem is still the same for both. So how do we get along together? The left believes is that we try to work together all as nations, right? We try to band together and sort of create a globalist state. And I've just to clear something up, I've heard that some people, when they say globalist, they are using it synonymously with like Jews and Zionist. I'm not. I just want to make sure that that's very clear, because I don't want to sound like some anti-Semite, which I'm definitely not, and in fact I don't see how anti-Semitism even comes up. But I digress, as long as you know that is true. But anyways, so like I said, the left wants to band together, all the countries to band together and sort of operate as one whole world. And the right believes, no, we need to operate as individual entities, country by country. We need to work together, and the countries work in a way that best suits their needs. So the reason why I personally abide by the nationalist viewpoint is that when you get in a world with so many diverse cultures, beliefs, viewpoints, things of that nature, and believe me, it's very diverse, it's hard to work together. And what it does is it kind of holds back success, right? Because it's like what they say, you're only as fast as your slowest man. And it's kind of in that sense, right? And with nationalism is we say, look, we will work together, but I'm going to work in the best interest of our country. So perfect example would be World War II. And you could make a case for World War I, but I believe World War II is a better example. So World War II, it was based mainly in Europe and then also in places in Asia. But so the United States, it was in our best interest, so we thought at the time, to stay out of it. We want to stay out of this. But then we got attacked. And then we started seeing that our allies in Europe got heavily, heavily damaged, right? So we acted in what was our best interest, and we helped, I'm going to be honest with you. America saved the day. Let's call it what it is. America saved the day because it was working in its own interest. And that's what you can get when you put nations working together for their own interests, right? It sounds like it doesn't exactly work, but when you can create these alliances, that's what happens. So there's that example, the nationalism being on the right and the globalism, internationalism being on the left. And then there's now to get back into just in our borders, right? So the left believes in sort of a redistributionism, and this problem this problem that I pose to you is how to solve the problem of poorer people and less people at more disadvantages than others. So the left, they believe more in the redistributionism. So what that is remember the example of taxes. They take more taxes, and then they spread it to people who need that money, right? So welfare, perfect example of that. Welfare is a great example. And then so this is what the right believes in. The right believes in sort of there's not really a name for it, but the best thing I could come up with was the bootstraps example. And if you paid attention in your U.S. history class, there was a section where they mentioned how there was a political party at one time in the United States that used, pull yourselves up by your bootstraps, and that's exactly what the right believes in. And although I'm not very sure, I will learn more about this as I'm studying history here, but I don't know if when that phrase bootstraps when it was popular, this was a long time ago, I don't know if it's used in the same context as I'm using it. I just want to be clear that pulling yourself up by the bootstrap is a way of how the right perceives and how you should solve your problems. So the right believes in the individual should be let alone to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, right? Start from the bottom where these people are, say in the lower classes. From the bootstraps, pull yourself up. And that's what they believe in. So here's a little caveat to the redistributionism. It sounds good, right? Well, these people don't have money but they're living in poor circumstances, so let's just give them money. But this is the problem I have with it, because people who earn that, there have to be people who earn that money. There are people who are going out to work really hard, and then through higher taxes, you're taking that money away from them that they clearly earned, and then you're giving it to someone who did not work to earn that. Now, there's two camps here of people who receive that money, and believe me, there is a gray area between the two, but for argument's sake, there are two camps. You have one camp who genuinely needs that welfare money. So I'm using welfare because it's a great example for this. There's one side, or one group of people who absolutely need that money. There's that single mother who has multiple children, and she's living in a city with city prices, and it's hard. She's trying to work two jobs, but she has to take care of kids, and it's super tough. So yeah, that that welfare check, that goes a really long way. And there are people who are just in absolutely poor circumstances that I believe deserve it more than others. So a big problem with just giving people money is that it de-incentivizes people to work hard. So someone in the other camp of people who receive welfare money is someone who just does not work. They rely solely on that welfare money because they know that since they are low income, they just get that money and they've adjusted their life to where they can live very comfortably off of it, and in some places in the United States more comfortably than I believe they ought to. They've since they've adjusted, they're totally content with that amount of money that they get. So they don't work. They don't work for anything. And here's the difference between two camps. That mother who's working very hard and struggling to keep her kids going and to keep her family comfortable, who's getting that welfare check, that key phrase there is she's working. Maybe she's working a couple jobs. And most people who are in this circumstance, not just raising a family, but just in a super hard place, they realize that the best way to do it is to work and make money for themselves. And then what happens though? She works, and because she's working really hard for her kids, or I should say this maybe about a father, right? A father with his whole family, and things are just really hard. They're working hard, and because they have that motivation to provide for their family, they work harder, and then the business owner or their manager, supervisor sees that, and they get pay raises, right? So they start making more and more money, because that's how our market works. When you work harder, you deserve to earn more, and that's how you are genuinely treated. And if you aren't, that's the beautiful thing of a free market. You can go to somewhere that will treat you how you work, or reward you based off how hard you work. And so since you're working, you're making more and more money, and then it gets to the point where you don't need that welfare check anymore. You're making just as much. Say at the beginning of 6 months you're making so much money plus welfare, and then after 6 months you're making just the money you're making alone equals the same amount that you were working with the welfare. And then why stop there? Keep working hard, and you're making more money, and soon you're surpassing that amount of money you were making with welfare. And that's a beautiful thing. But the problem is you have people who say, well, I just get a welfare check, and why work? And these are the people who are totally taking advantage of the system, right? They're getting free money, so why go anywhere else? And the problem with that is that they are reaping the benefits that someone else had to work for. And I mean, I don't know about you, but the idea of keeping my earned money sounds really good, right? And that's the problem I have with it. And so that's what I mean by bootstraps and redistributionism. That person who is working really hard to sort of pull themselves up by the bootstraps and provide for their family and get themselves out of the circumstances, they're working for that, and they're pulling themselves up by the bootstraps, and they're going high, and the people on the right, they want you to work hard, and the market will reward you for it. And when you can work hard, you can succeed, and succeed even further. Now, with these people who do not work and they just get welfare checks, they just stay there, right? They don't make any more money because they've adjusted. But these people who worked really hard, they're making more and more money, and they're making a better lives for themselves. So that's why I believe in bootstrapism, if you will. But that's mainly the difference, the redistributionism, to give people more, that to give those who don't have, to give it to them, And then the bootstraps is say, hey, you know, here's a market, go work in it and make some money and become successful. So that's a big difference between the left and the right. Like I said, right being sort of the bootstraps ideology, and the left being the redistributionism ideology. So the last point I want to touch up on is kind of how they treat just a person, how someone in these two different camps of ideologies, how they see a person. So what the left does is that they play into a group identity, and what the right does is they play into individualism. And spoiler alert, the individual is what Western civilization was built upon. Western civilization, beginning in Europe, well, one could argue in Greece, but mainly starting to become implemented in Europe, and then refined and made in America, and then America was the light on the hill for Western civilization. But anyways, I digress yet again. And so this is what happens. The left, they address someone in your group identity. So what does that mean, group identity? It can mean your race, it can mean your sexual identity, it could mean your income, or your income class. It could mean your religious background. It could mean a number of things, right? But basically these groups. And then what the right says is, well, we don't really care what you are. We just care, can you work hard? Can you make something of yourself? Can you make a good life for yourself? And can you be a respectful citizen in society? Individualism. So the left, they will tell you, well, this group here, this specific group, is being say oppressed, and then they want to keep that group oppressed. Well, sorry, they don't want to keep the group oppressed, although some conspiratorial far right wingers will say that they do. Well, I shouldn't say far right wingers, but that's a totally different case in and of itself. But anyways, the left, this is what I want to say. The left addresses these people as if they're oppressed as a group. Now, the big problem is that in society you see a lot of people calling people on the right racist, right? And then people on the left are supposed to be the big, well, I shouldn't say people on the right are just racist. They call them everything. They call them racist, sexist, bigot, homophobe. I mean, any ist and obe and all of it, they call them. And you can't tell me they don't, because the left does call them that. And this is what's really going on here. The left wants to address you as your race or any other identity that you have, and the right says, we're not racist at all. We just care about the individual. We don't care if you're black. We don't care if you're gay. We don't care if you're a straight white Christian male, or we don't care if you're an Asian Jew. All we care about is if you can make something of yourself in this society. That's all we care about. And what we want to do is we want to operate in the ways that, as I've listed prior to this, operate based on ideologies within the right to make sure that you can be as highly of a functioning individual as you can. And see, this is my personal problem with the group identity, is that you kind of don't let people out of their groups, right? And it's like, well, let the person succeed, you know? But anyways, I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, because like many of these rabbit holes, it's very deep. But that's basically, in a sense, how they view a person in society. The right, they view you as the individual. The left views you based off a group identity, and that sort of sums up my video here today. So the point of this video was to let you know what both camps are thinking, and I want you to be able to see both sides of the argument as best as I can portray them, given my biases. See both sides of the argument and decide for yourself, because as like this show is aimed at is for people of Generation Z and tail end millennials, because we're coming of adulthood now, especially the older Gen Z people. I hear Gen Z is still being born right now, which I guess, but I mean, so with that being said, a lot of the audience that I aim this towards, we're very young and we're coming of voting age, and it's going to get to the point where we're going to be facing these problems. We're going to be facing problems like taxes. We're going to be paying taxes. We're going to be facing problems as for healthcare. Our parents aren't going to be taking care of our healthcare anymore. We're going to be facing problems of where we can work, where we don't have to work, and how our work operates, and we're also going to have to decide how we best feel that the country should operate on the global scale, how it should take care of people in more disadvantaged circumstances, and we should decide what the best way is for, say, the government to address someone. And this is why I wanted to make this video, so you knew the two main ways of going about solving these problems, and the two main ways of operation of government. But I do want to finish saying this, and it's like what I said in the beginning of this episode, is that all of these problems are just an ends. The two parties differ by their means. And I always like to add something in this episode because of the division in our society and our culture right now. But I always like to add something that can help bring people closer together. And I think if we can all understand that we want to solve the same problems, we'll be better off. Because when we say, oh, you want to solve a market failure? I want to solve a market failure. Huh. Oh, you want to do it differently than I do? Well, maybe we can meet somewhere in the middle. And sometimes, well, that was very contradictory. I will stop there. But oftentimes, meeting in the middle can be the best thing, especially for society. And most of society is near the center of that spectrum. Good majority. So I really hope that this video was very informative of operations, different operations of government, and I hope you have finished this video knowing something more than you did previously. That's my aim with every video. And if you are ever curious about any of these topics that I touched on, if you want to say, hey, look, Trevor, you're on the right. How would you go about solving that problem? Could you go more in depth with solving that problem you mentioned in the video? Say, Trevor, explain how the right will solve the problem of healthcare, or explain nationalism so much. Does that mean Nazism? Because a lot of people think it does. The first thing I will tell you is no, but explain that. If you want to do that, please find me on Twitter, my secondary account at tmauk _2, TMAUK _2, and I am totally open for respectful and courteous debate and also answering questions. I do not know. I'm not an expert in any of this stuff. I want to make sure that's clear. But I will give you my best knowledge of whatever you ask, and I will let you know when that line approaches that I do not know anymore. So thank you very much for joining me, and as always, if you enjoyed it, please like it and share it. Share it with someone. Share it with a friend. Share it with a family member. Tell someone about it. I really enjoy doing these videos. They are a great exercise for me mentally, and they challenge me, which I always love a good mental challenge. And so I really appreciate you joining me. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate you. And please feel free to contact me on my Twitter page. And until then, well, I should say until next time, take care and, well, keep on keeping on.